and I'm gonna try to start. All right, is this working? Yeah? All right, great, perfect. Hi everyone, I'm Joanna from Café con Libros. I'm here to welcome you on behalf of Café con Libros and Books Are Magic. Thank you so much for making it out tonight. I know we're all really excited. I will try not to say too much because, Jasmine and Tia are here, so I understand. Before we get started though, I just want to say a couple of things. There is a restroom, it's through the doors that you all came in, and it's all the way if we're this way, it's on the left side. So in case you need that at any point. The left, yeah. Left side, right side. Y'all, I still do the L's. I'm not even gonna lie. Also, thanks St. Anne's for allowing us to use the space. The space is so dope and huge, and we all love it. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for just following our mask mandates, for coming with your vaccine cards, and everything so we can do this as safely as possible. At the end, we both have a Q&A, so we'll signal around 7:45-ish that people can start lining up here so that you can start asking any questions that you have, and we'll do that until we have enough time, and then after the events, there will be time for you to get your book signed over there. All right, so let's officially get started, right? Yeah. So we're being joined by Jasmine Guillory, who's a New York Times bestselling author of novels including The Wedding Date, the Racist Book Club selection The Proposal, and While We Were Dating. Her work has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Cosmopolitan, Bon Appetit, and Time, and she's a frequent book contributor on The Today Show, and she lives in Oakland, California. So thank you for being in New York. And then joining Jasmine in conversation, we have Tia Williams, who's had a 15-year career as a beauty editor for magazines including Elle, Glamour, and Essence. In 2004, she pioneered the beauty blog industry with Shake Your Beauty. She wrote the best-selling novel The Accidental Diva and penned 2 white novels, It Chicks and 60 Candles. Her award-winning novel, The Perfect Find, will be adapted into a Netflix film starring Gabrielle Union. And then her latest novel, 7 Days in June, which I know destroyed all of us, was introduced to the Book Club pick for June 2021 and an instant New York Times bestseller. She's currently an editorial director at Estee Lauder Companies and lives with her daughter and husband in Brooklyn. So we're done with me, and we'll turn it over to Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. Hello. Is this on? Is it? Yeah. It is. Okay.
Oh no, yours isn't. That one is.
Now it's on.
Yeah.
Mine is on. Hello. Okay, so Jasmine and I have done these conversations before, but we've never actually met each other. It's the first time we got to meet in real life. Especially when we did one together last year for 7 Days in June, we determined that we're cousins. We are absolutely cousins. We're certain of it. We have not proved it yet, but we're sure. We totally look alike. And also, both of our ancestors are from Louisiana and are Creole. And if you look on my Chevalier family tree, very, very, very far out are Guillory. Yeah. See? So we're 18 birds now. Yeah. So we are here to talk about By the Book, which I read in 3 days, which was so delicious, and it's my new favorite read. It's so much fun. I could gush and gush, but I always like to hear the author sort of describe the book and what it means to them. So can you let us all know?
Yeah, so By the Book is a contemporary reimagining of Beauty and the Beast with Black women at its center. It is set in the publishing world, and Isabel is a assistant in publishing. Towards the beginning of the book, she's sort of feeling like she's not sure she's in the right place, and then her boss is kind of difficult, doesn't give her a lot of encouragement, and she hears her boss complaining about this one of her authors who was supposed to turn in his memoir years ago and hasn't done it. He's a former child star, was supposed to write this splashy memoir and hasn't been heard from. And so Isabel goes to his house to kind of bang on his door to get him to turn in his book, and then ends up moving in with him to help him write his book.
the grumpy / sunshine.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good. Like, when one character is like, super anti, and the other one is like, what a beautiful day it is today. The energy is so good. Okay, so the premise by the book is definitely Beauty and the Beast. What made you pick that? First of all, let's talk about the series.
Yes. So, the Meant to Be series is a new series that Disney is doing with like contemporary reimaginings of princess stories. The first book was If the Shoe Fits that Julie Murphy wrote last year. It's a Cinderella story, and then Beauty and the Beast by book is the next one, and then there's more coming. I've always loved Belle. Like, she loved reading. That was me as a kid, and also I was dressed up as a princess and was like dancing around the house, and so I was delighted to be able to sort of get to tell both of those stories at once.
So why did you set it in book publishing?
The funny thing about that is it felt natural, right, for Belle to want to grow up and work in publishing. But it was definitely not a book that I could have written before. I had written other books and sort of been in the publishing world and knew some of the weird things that happen and the hard stuff and the good stuff. And so that felt like a familiar thing for me. The funniest part is when I first gone back and forth with Disney, working on a proposal, the original idea was for her to because of course they had to sort of be in his secluded house together, right? Which was kind of part of the whole idea. But at first it was for him to be somewhere in upstate New York. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I'm in California, I can't write books. Well, and so then I was like, it should be in California. And thank goodness I did, because I ended up, I wrote this, we'd had the deal for it and everything long before the pandemic, and I wrote it during the pandemic, so thank goodness there were places that I could go to do research that I did not have to go to everything for.
Exactly, yeah. Pandemic writing, we're going to get into that in a second. So I'm not going to give any spoilers, but in reading the book, I highlighted many parts that are nods to Disney's Beauty and the Beast. That's not true. Beans and please, I won't give it away, but Isabel's relationship with the inanimate objects in the house are giving very much Disney's Beauty.
I have a lot of that. Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious, how often did you revisit the original text, and were there things that you deliberately left out?
Yeah, so I watched the movie right before I started writing. So I had a sort of outline, and then I watched the movie to get some ideas for names and fun stuff to put in. But then I didn't go back to it at all, because I really wanted to tell my own version of the story, and to not get too caught up in oh, does the plot have to be this way or that way? So I wanted to sort of get the feeling, but not feel forced to be in any kind of specific way to do it. There were definitely things that when I watched the movie, I was like, oh, so he imprisons her. I'm not going to do that. She was a different way for her to be in the house. So there were definitely things okay, well, let's update this a little bit.
And what's funny, having a 13-year-old daughter who was becoming very, TikTok woke.
Yeah.
And will say, you realize Ariel had to dim her shine.
Yeah.
She literally lost her voice. And it's some of these fairy tales could use a little bit of
Yeah.
And in reading by the book, it was there are some pieces that were not so Beauty and the Beast that hit me later. You know what I mean? They weren't so on the nose. It was kind of you're saying, it was more of a feeling. It was oh, yellow sundress, yes, I get it. So Fairy Tale Belle is very, famously empowered and strong, and doesn't, she's no pushover. What were some of the characteristics of the Fairy Tale Belle that you infused into Isabel?
So, I wanted her to be sort of her own person, to be strong, to like have her own ideas about life. But I also knew that, she was 25, she'd sort of been in this role in publishing for a few years, and I didn't work in publishing, but I remember how that age felt. And there's a lot of uncertainty and like, am I doing the right thing with my life? I also feel like those few years in your like late teens and early 20s, you're like charging ahead, like I know what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. So I wanted her to feel sort of a lot of that, like to have had some of that confidence kind of stripped away from her a little bit, and then be empowered to get it.
And I'm curious, because this is something that I'm sort of playing with as a writer. How did it feel to you to write that age? Like to write a 25-year-old?
Yeah, at first it was weird, because it's been a while since I've been 25. So my friends who were in the audience would I really did. I feel like that age I had a very clear feeling of how I felt at that age. Like, that I should have done so many other things, right? Because I think you think that like, oh, well, 25, because I remember when I was like in college and thinking like, where I would be when I'm 25, and I was none of those places, and I just felt like I was behind, and not like I should be doing this or that or the other thing, and like feeling uncertain about everything. And so I did because at first I was like, how do I write this? But I do really remember how I felt at that age, and so I wanted Isabel to kind of go through some of that, but then also come out knowing who she was and knowing, feeling confident about her life choices.
Right, and she has some moments where it's like, okay, she's 25, she's in college 4 years ago, but she really stood her ground in some amazingly, mature ways. It was such an interesting character. Okay, so Bo. Same question. So Bo is the beast, stand-in. There's a grizzly beard, there is a very grumpy, meet cute. What are some of the ways that because like you were saying, I watched Beauty and the Beast a couple of months ago, and it was like, wow, he's really grumpy.
Yeah.
Like, what? How did you lighten it up for us? Because you really did.
So, one of my struggles with enemies to lovers is at the beginning, I'm always thinking, but what's so mean? And so I think when I have written books with that kind of beginning, I always want to know for myself exactly why each of them is coming from where they are. So that especially, and to have it really make sense to me so that it can make sense later on. Because at first, because sometimes people do things, I'm like, I would never like someone who did that to me, like why is she, And so I had to really kind of think about who he was, figure out why had he been in this house for the past year all by himself? What was he escaping from? What was he afraid of? And so figuring that out about him, which took a while. I think one of the hardest things for me about writing this book also was, all of my other books have been written in dual point of view. And this one was just from Isabel's point of view, and I didn't realize how much harder that would be.
Was that one of the requirements for the series?
No, that was my idea. No, I think, this is Isabel's story, it should be all written from her side. And that was before I started writing it. And then I realized that because I'm so used to switching back and forth, I'm always thinking when I'm writing one scene about how the other person is thinking or feeling or why they're thinking that way. But when at first I wasn't thinking about that about Bo, I was just thinking about Isabel, right? And then I was like, why is he acting like that? I don't know. I should figure that out when writing it. And so I had to really go back and think about what he was doing and why, and change some of his behaviors and kind of figure him out. as I wrote, especially like kind of the first half of the book, to like get to know him and who he really was.
And that's what really makes it a three-dimensional modern romance, I feel like. You know, when we were growing up, some of the, you know, the 80s paperback romances, the heroine was fully fleshed out because it was for a female reader, and they assumed that, you know, we just wanted a cardboard cutout man. But, you know, they never really had that much of a real backstory or a, you know, they had a function and they were there to do what they were there to do, which has a tough nice. But I think readers now want to understand these guys and they want to get in their heads, and you did such a great job of sort of explaining from whence he came that I almost forgot that it was just from her point of view until you just said that, yeah. So I think you sort of answered this, but I'm still curious, what was the hardest part about writing this book?
Yeah, so the point of view was definitely one of them. And I think also it was sort of like, well, I mean, figuring out Isabel, like when I wrote this book, I was sort of like, I had a very detailed outline, which sometimes my outlines are more detailed than others. This one was like many pages long, super detailed, okay. And like I was just like charging ahead, wrote a whole bunch. And at about 30,000 words, which is just about like a third of the book, I was like, wait, this is all wrong.
Oh no. No, it's fine.
And I took like 2 days to, and I kept sort of writing, but I was still like, I'm right? This is all wrong? Yes, this is all wrong. And so I started over from the beginning. Because I knew, I mean, it took a few, luckily in those 2 days I sort of figured out how to fix it. Well, sort of, I mean, it was still a first draft. I never fixed anything until I'm like, well, into a 5th or 6th draft. But like, I knew Isabel had to be a totally different person. Because I got to a point where I was like, what would she do now? Well, this would be the end of the book. I have to do something different. And also, I realized that she was sort of getting on my nerves. Like, there was one that I was like, oh my god, why is she crying? Alright, let's change this. And so yeah, so I started again from the beginning. And actually, there were a few plot points that were the same, but the interactions between the characters were totally different. She was a very different person. And it just worked a lot better. And the funny thing though is like in those first 3,000 words, I was just like, this isn't hard, I'm just writing away. Then I was like, oh, but it wasn't hard because it wasn't.
Can I ask you what was so wrong about it?
The character was just like she was just not the right character. Like she wasn't, she didn't interest me that much, I think, partly. She wasn't right for him. He wasn't like, the situation was all wrong. It just didn't feel right to me. And once I kind of got a kind of the right twist on who she was, it made that a lot easier. But yeah, that was a bad moment. I still remember, like, I started doing this thing during the pandemic, where I would like drive aimlessly around and like think about the book I was working on, because again, I had to leave my house at some point, and there were like I started doing this in, I guess this was like August of 2020, when in California there were like all these fires, and so you couldn't go for a walk outside because the air quality was like 350. Which if you don't pay attention to air quality, because why would you live in New York? Like good is like 35. And so I started like aimlessly driving around. So I remember exactly like where I was driving when I realized like, wait, you have to start from the beginning. Like so.
Oh my god. So for the benefit of anyone who may be a writer in the audience, how did you feel writing during a pandemic? And you've written, weren't you finishing up a book at the beginning of the pandemic?
I have written 3 books.
Oh my gosh.
So far during the pandemic. I say so far. I am not writing another one. I protest, like, I cannot do it. This thing has to end. We gotta finish this before I write another book. Like, but yes, I have written 3 books during the pandemic. I mean, it has really varied a lot. I mean, there have been times when I've been like, I cannot do this today. But then there have been times where the only thing getting me out of bed in the morning was like, I get to work on my book today. You know, like it was kind of the only good thing, like the only thing that was bringing me joy was the book I was working on. But yes, there was some struggle.
Do you feel like you're like, do you ever have a moment, because I'm having this moment where it's like you forget how people talk to each other?
Oh yeah.
And so how do we act and
Yeah.
work together?
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Because I think the whole world has forgotten how to talk to each other, so that makes sense.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's like, working in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Watching TV
Yeah.
helps a lot.
Yeah.
So what was the major difference, like, when writing this book versus writing the others? Because By the Book has a different feel.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there were a few things. I think partly it was, you know, it was younger, it was all from a point of view, but also it was fun to be able to, you know, because it's like a Disney book, and it was fun to be able to, like, make it feel a little bit magical, sometimes. And so there isn't exactly magic in the book, but I did want it to sort of, like, feel like she's, like, sort of in a castle. Yeah, so that was also fun for me to, like, kind of sprinkle in a little bit of fairy dust as I wrote.
Yeah, and you feel it. You definitely feel it. And the house, we knew it was a house, but it definitely felt like a castle. And I was thinking of, you know, like San Simeon, like some of those like old American castles, like in California. Did you have a specific house in mind?
So I definitely like did a lot of Google searches before I started writing because I had been, so the book is set in Santa Barbara. I had been on a trip there maybe like 4 years before I started writing, so I had a lot of like stuff in my mind. But I did a bunch of Google searches for like, because I had an idea for what the house was, and I was like, the houses there look like this, right? And so I was like looking around, yes, okay, they do. And then once I had a draft in, a friend and I took a trip there, and so we just like basically drove around the hills. I'm glad that we didn't like not get arrested because we were just like driving around all these expensive houses, and I'm like filming out. I was like, this was what I could like remember afterwards. And so that was really great to get like, you know, okay, yes, this is in this place, and also to think about, you know, because like what the gardens look like, what the, you know, foliage was, like all of that kind of stuff, how the distances, how like what the view was like, and so I did a lot of that kind of research, which was really fun.
Yeah, the destination research is always fabulous.
Yeah.
So it is definitely magical, it is definitely a fairy tale, but you do touch on some very real sort of issues without it being too heavy. Namely the idea of being the first / the only. That sort of phenomenon in, you know, when you're Black in corporate America, it's something that a lot of us experience, being the only one in the room.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, Isabel was she the only Black person at the book publishing house?
In her like division.
Or in her division, yeah. Why did you choose to focus on that experience?
I think because it just felt so real, right? It felt like this is of course what would happen to her if she was a young assistant in publishing. There, you know, she would be one of the only Black people there. Like, and like having published other books before, like I talked to other people in publishing, and I know this is what happens, and then they'll, you know, there's a book coming, and they'll turn to them and be like, what did you think about this? And also, you know, I've had experiences like that in like all sorts of different places in my life, where like all of a sudden someone's talking about, and so I didn't want that honestly to be the focus of the book, but that had to play a role because if she's in publishing, like that's gonna happen to her.
Yeah, it's definitely real, and it was really kind of delightful for me because my very first job when I got out of college for a year before I got into magazines was book publishing. I was working at Doubleday. I was an editorial assistant, only one. And one time an editor asked me, she's a cookbook editor, and she had a question about the soul food book. Okay, so this is 1997, so, fair enough. But, she asked me, and I was like, I only know how to make toaster strudel. Like, I exclusively eat bagel bites. Why do you think I know about soul food? And you're right, and it's like, it's such a real experience, and it's like kind of a bummer that was 1997, and this is 2022, and it's still sort of, that's what the other Black Girl was about.
Exactly.
So yeah, I loved that you had that slice of reality in this fairy tale, because, these are the times in which we live. So in keeping with romance, rules, which we love, Isabel and Bo got there. They were after, I'm not spoiling anything by giving that away. Where do you think they are now? Like, what do you think happens after the end?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, when I really think, because for me, the essential thing in writing a romance is to make that happily ever after feel earned, and also feel like these are two people who really would fall in love with each other and would really be happy together. Because I think those are two separate things, right? Sometimes you'll fall in love but not be happy. And so I wanted to be able to get that for both of them. I hope they're hanging out in Santa Barbara right now. It's beautiful there. It's in May. Perfect.
And do you figure out,
Maybe hanging out with you in May?
maybe hanging out in our recent so just a craft question. Do you already know why they fall in love from the beginning?
Usually, no. My first draft is usually me kind of stumbling around figuring characters out, and then eventually I get there. But it takes basically the entirety of my first draft to figure out who each of them are, and then why they would fall in love, and then I spend 3 or 4 more drafts making sure I get that right. But I usually don't know. When I start, I kind of start with knowing who at least one of the characters is, and then a few specific plot points, and then some sort of ending, and sometimes it's more detailed than that, but those are the things I need to know. And then I kind of write my way into knowing a lot more about people.
So as, queen romance novelist, what do you find, easier is a weird word because none of this is easy, but which do you think is more challenging, I'll say, to write? The male protagonist or the female protagonist?
For me it really depends on the book, because usually I find the female protagonist easier. It's easier for me to sort of get into her head. But in some books, in While We're Dating, which came out last year, I knew who Ben was immediately. He had just popped in my head. I knew everything about him.
And he was a previous character.
He was a previous character, but he had only been in 2 little scenes. I didn't know him that well. And then I just started writing, and I was like, oh, well, I know. Because there's always a scene or 2, sometimes 5, 6, in a first draft where I write something, and then I'm like, oh, they would never do that. That's wrong. When I'm sort of ending in the second draft or figuring it out. And with Ben, I think there was just one scene, and I was like, oh, no, I would never do that. And then I just I knew exactly what he would do from then on. And it usually takes me a lot longer. So it really just sort of depends on the characters and how I figure them out, and what I know about them sort of going in.
Okay, this is my last question, but it's a very important one.
Okay.
Do you, again, as queen romance novelist, do you find it important or valuable at all to actually fall in love with your male protagonist?
So I fall in love with them as a couple together. Like sometimes, so once I was working on a book and I was struggling with it a lot and just like, I just didn't, I was kind of struggling with like finding the fun in it again. I was like, oh, well, this next time I outlined it, I wasn't really in the mood. And then I was like, I just need to write a scene where these people are just like hanging out and like, hanging out and talking to each other, and maybe this will, and this won't go in the book, I just need to do this. And like, writing that scene like threw me back into like the joy of this book. And so I sort of fall in love with like them as a couple and being with them together. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could like just be in that car with them, hanging out as we're driving along. And so for me, it's usually like the people that I'm writing, I sort of fall with them and their relationship.
That's really valuable writing advice. Like, even, whatever you're writing, if it's for someone else, if it's for a brand, if it's for your publisher, like, if you're feeling lost, to take a moment and write purely for yourself.
And I ended up keeping that scene in the book because like I had so much fun writing it that I was like, well, I need to find some way to advance the story and keep this in there. But it did really help me just to like, okay, I'm just gonna write this like sort of just for fun. And so I have like sort of gone back to that at other times in books when I'm struggling with something, I will like just sort of write a scene just for me that's like, that I know that is just sort of them hanging out or like whatever those two people would do, or like a group of people sometimes, like that really helps bring me back to the love of the book itself.
Okay, I lied, that wasn't my last question, because building on that, could you just take us through your craft, like the scheduling of it, how you do this? You were a lawyer.
Yeah.
Is there anything from your previous career? There's so many lawyer turned
There's so
novelists.
many, yeah.
It's actually like a thing.
Yeah.
You guys should all do it. But yeah, like what were some of the transferable skills that you took from your previous career?
I mean, I think part of it is I knew what kind of a person I was. Like I knew how I work and then how, because there are always things about ourselves that like we wish weren't true. Like I wish I could set my alarm to get up early at 6 in the morning and like, right, I've never done that in my life. So there are things that like I acknowledge I am the kind of person who needs structure, and I can't do too much at the last minute even though I want to. Like I am a procrastinator. And so like I had like knowing what kind, like how I get work done was one of the most valuable things for me, I think, because I can say like, okay, I have a deadline next time. This means like I also know that I need like my first draft is going to be messy, so I need to like finish my first draft significantly before that deadline. So I need to start writing the next day, and I try to build in some wiggle room in there for myself. Sometimes that's more successful than other times. But I have friends who can like not write for a long time and then write 10,000 words in a weekend. That is not me. I am much more of a when I start working on a draft, I usually write every day until like the draft is done.
Oh my gosh. That is rare and amazing.
But I write for like, but that is because I am such a procrastinator, and so I know that if I don't do it one day, then the next day I'll be like, well, I didn't write yesterday, it's fine. I can just not do it, and then a week will go by. And I also, I write a little bit every day, like 500 to like 1,000 words maybe. And so like doing that a little bit every day, and it also just sort of keeps it in my mind. Like a lot of the work I do, sometimes it's just like puzzling stuff out. And so being able to have a draft alive in my mind for, I don't know, 3 to like 6 months is really valuable for me, because then they do, like the people come alive to me and I figure out the story. And then I have a very like detailed spreadsheet system them for revisions.
So you can do Excel.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have had to, like, look, I have friends who are very good at Excel and have to teach me things. So sometimes I have, like, late night phone calls, like, please tell me how to do this. But they're usually just like, because I have lots of, like, because also revisions can be so overwhelming, especially, you know, my first drafts are, like, long and messy. There's always things that I know I need to cut and, like, move around and stuff. And so having a spreadsheet where I can kind of see it all is really helpful.
That is brilliant, and we are getting the wrap-up signal. So thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge. Jasmine is about to share more to answer your question. I guess there's the line, we're gonna have a line here. If anyone has a question, you can just-
Is this microphone working? Folks can hear it?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so if I have Julia from Books or Magic, if folks want to just form a line here, if you have a question, then you can ask Jasmine and Tia your questions and you'll both answer.
I'll go first. Hi, friends! So nice to see you in person. I saw you both on Zoom and got to ask a question there, and you both are just so amazing. So thank you for sharing your gift with us, and thank you for being here. My question is about movies. So when I read all of Jasmine's books, they play like a movie in my head, and they play like a series, kind of like Love Life, where each book has its own season. So if I hear your books are being turned into movies, how would you like it to be done? Would you like it in like a series format? Would you like it in a different movies? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, look, let's all just keep our fingers crossed. There are no guarantees anywhere around movies. I would like it in any sort of. Yeah, I think it would be delightful. I mean, I think, especially my first 6 books are interconnected in many ways, and so that would be fun to be able to have like people from other books like stopping in. But whatever way it might happen, like I would be delighted if it happens.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
You are famous for your pep talks. You give great pep talks on Instagram.
Yes.
I am curious if you could give a pep talk for anyone who is interested in moving into a creative field from a not very traditional creative field, and what gave you the courage to make that leap.
Yeah, I started writing, there are people who want to be writers since they were little and started writing really young, and that was not me. I have always been a huge reader, but I didn't start writing until I had been a lawyer for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years, and I realized that I didn't have a creative outlet, and that was something I missed, and I realized that I hadn't, this is real nerdy, but I hadn't been in school for a number of years, and I missed that process of learning something new. And so I had some conversations with friends who were writers, and I was like, let me try this and see if I like it. And I think that, first of all, starting off that way was so helpful for me because I really did. I was, I just sort of started off with, I'm going to write a book, and that book has never been published, but I loved it. I looked forward to coming home at night and sitting on my couch and writing. And I think that's one of the most important things, to have that love there, and to know what excites you about it and what is fun about it, because we were talking about this before we came on, once it is a career, you have a different relationship with it. And so sometimes I do have to go back, like I was talking about in those scenes that I have to write for myself sometimes, I have to go back to what is it that I love about this? I need to still feel the joy here. And I think, and then I did both at the same time for a while. And I think figuring out how to juggle, figuring out where, how you can snatch bits of time from places. I mean, I wrote my first 3 books while I was writing full time. A lot of those, I would took the wedding date, I would bring my laptop with me to work and go to the Starbucks across the street, and then break for 30 minutes at lunchtime, and then work more at night. But like, if you do a little bit, like, you know, whatever the thing is that you're working on, like, just sort of keep at it and do a little bit every day, and you will, like, that's one of the reasons that I sort of keep detailed word count spreadsheets. Because even if it's only a few hundred words a day, if you go back and look after a few weeks, you'll be like, oh, well, that I did, you know? And so I think it's really important to be able to look back at what you did and feel proud of yourself, because that's one of the things that will keep you going. And then also to find other people to be supportive of you, to be your cheerleaders. A lot, you know, finding other writer friends who would like cheer me on. Like one of my good friends was sort of the first person that I really talked to about like, you know, I might be interested in writing. And she, like, from the beginning, like I sent her like my very bad like half of a first draft of a book, and she just said like, keep going, this is great. And that was like the thing. And also, you know, now she gives me much more detailed criticism, which is what I need now, you know, and so I think that is really helpful to like have those people who, because we all know, like, we all have different kinds of friends, right? Sometimes they're the friends who you go to when you need like the tough love, and sometimes they're the friends who you go to when you need the like, well, you should do this. At this point, you need the friend who you're gonna go to and be like, yes, girl, go. And so like, go to those friends. Like, this is not a knock on any of the other friends. Like, we need them too. But like, you need the people who are gonna just be your cheerleaders and like keep going, because it's like having a creative career is challenging in many different ways. But you need to sort of like hold on to this stuff that you love about it from the beginning.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm Naomi. So I have 3 questions, all connected into one. So one of my favorite aspects, and my favorite aspect is the interconnectedness of your characters in your books, because I love series in general. Is there a reason for that, number one? I know, and number 2 is, I know that this is part of a Disney series, but is this character related to anybody from your previous books? And the 3rd is, do you plan on starting another series of interconnected books ever?
So I'll take the second one first. This one is, she's not related to anybody. This book's not related to anybody in my other books. The other 6 books being connected was sort of on purpose and sort of not. I mean, the first 3, I had, like, when I was writing The Wedding Date, I had the idea for the 3rd book, The Wedding Party, like, as I was writing it. So I knew I wanted to write that. And then, like, I had the idea for the proposal later. And so in my mind, I was thinking it was just going to be those 3. And then I just kept having ideas for other people, like, triggered for the books. So it was not initially on purpose, and then they just sort of all happened. Maybe I might, like, so my next book comes out in September. It's called Drunk on Love. And that might be the beginning of a new series, we'll see. I haven't figured out what's happening yet, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tanya, and my question is for both of you because you're both Black women who write romance. And it's kind of like you said, like a TikTok woke thing. So basically, like, a lot of us read contemporary romances, but we're finding that most of the male characters are in interracial relationships with Black women. So I wanted to know if it's hard to get publishers to publish books that have Black men as the male character, because that's who I want to see myself with. And because we only see it in like the urban fiction, and it's always like gang violence. I don't want to see that, you know? I mean, it's cool sometimes, but you know, it's okay, but I want the cute stuff with a Black man too. And that plays a part in like how I buy books. I buy books based on covers. And yeah, I don't always want to see a white man on the cover.
I think was probably a lot harder than it is now to get publishers to do that. I think publishers are, I mean, you know, publishers have been slow, but they, I think are a lot more willing now for that, and that's not like, you know, of my 7 books, I think 4 of them have had a black man in that role, and that's never been a like, issue or conversation at all with any of my publishers, which has been what I get.
It used to be. So I published my first novel in 2004, and it was a very different story back then. And even until like 10 years after that, I published a book, and all of my couples are both black in all of my novels, but in one of them, I was asked by my agent to add an ex who was white. And the thinking is the same thing as it is, or as it was in Hollywood and TV, which is that if you have 2 black characters, and then it's immediately a black book, or a black movie, or a black TV show, and then it's marginalized, and you don't get the same funding, you don't get the same marketing support, you don't get the same positions in bookstores. Sure, Essence and Ebony will cover it, but although these are the things that publishers used to think about.
I mean, I think they probably still think about it.
And it's even down to the skin color. Like, if you have black characters, it's even down to how dark are they going to be on the cover. I'm so thrilled by her. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but this is a dark-skinned black woman, and thank you. My first novel, we casted a light-skinned Puerto Rican woman on the cover of my book because that was the directive. It would be more mainstream if she's lighter. But I do think that publishers have become a lot more diverse and inclusive, if for no other reason than now in our culture today, they're being held accountable. And it is a bad look if you know, you're operating from a place of colorism and, you know, all of that. But I'll take it, yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you both for being here. This has been such a great conversation to witness. So I have a question for both of you. I want to know if either of you have a favorite book that you've written, and if so, why?
Okay, so people always want to know my favorite, but I feel like I would be betraying any of my other favorites.
Makes sense.
If I said that I liked some of them better than the others. I think each book is like very special to me in different ways. Partly because of like what they meant for me, you know, when I think it's my first published book. But also like the books that I wrote during the pandemic, like helped me in many ways throughout that, you know. So I love all of my books in very different ways. So I cannot choose.
I know, they're like your babies.
I know.
It's like your parents are always like, we love you all equally, but you know that they actually have so all of my protagonists are me at different stages of my life, and so I judge heavily myself at different stages of my life. So I'm like, ooh, who I was when I wrote that is a mess. So I don't even know about that. So my favorite is always the most current one, because whatever's happening currently in my life, I feel like is the most evolved and correct version of myself. So in 10 years, I'll look back on the book I write now and be like, oh, she was on the hot mess. But yeah, my favorite right now is the last book I wrote, 7 Days in June.
It's a great book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm short for this mic.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I love you guys both so much. I want to say that your books got me through the pandemic. I don't know about anybody else. Yes. But like, they were a lifesaver to get me out of my tiny Brooklyn apartment and out of the craziness of what was happening. So thank you. There was like so much beauty in that work. So I would like to ask about sex scenes, love scenes. You both write them so beautifully, and they have such a strong female perspective. I want to hear about your journey of how you come up with them so that they are titillating, but also, I don't know, they're very classy. There's just a lot. I want to know all of the things.
Okay, well, first of all, I need to prepare you all by the book because it is Disney.
Okay. But they kiss.
Helps to answer another of T's questions from earlier, which is one of the hard things about writing this book, which is that it was challenging for me. Like, partly by the nature of the story, you know, Beauty and the Beast, it had to be kind of a slow burn, like they were together, and I was like, I haven't kissed yet. I don't understand. No, I had that moment. I was like, wait, is page 200? I also did not. I was like, I never usually read characters down. So that was a new, different experience for me. I did at one point, to get you excited, the next book I did at one point, say to my agent, the next book I write, they're gonna have sex in the first chapter. So I will say, like, for me, it really is about who the characters are and how they relate to one another, and then who they are at that specific point in their relationship. Because it really does change throughout their book and through the relationship. And so I really think about, like, what would they do right now at this moment? What are they each thinking about? And it's different when it's like, this is the first time versus like, you know, they've been together a month now, they've been together a few, you know, so I really try to just sort of think about who they are and then start writing. And I think, I mean, I know, like, I've never been a person who can write books out of order. I know people, yeah. And so I'm just like, all right, is sex scenes next? Boom. And I try not to, I mean, luckily, not luckily, but it's been a pandemic for the past few years, so I haven't had to face the, like, well, I have to write a sex scene and I'm writing in a coffee shop situation. I try to do those, like, when other people can't see my screen.
I'm working on a book now that's due on June 1st. Help me, we're the church. And this is the first novel I've ever written where I'm in a relationship, I'm married, and I have lots of sex. But like you said, be exactly where the characters are at the time. It doesn't, it can't really take you out of the story. If you're doing it right, it's unveiling something new that we didn't know about these characters. It's like, oh, she's really dirty. Or, you know, like in one of my novels, the male protagonist is a recovering alcoholic. And the female protagonist hasn't had sex in a while. And so they're both just arc. I don't know. I have never had sober sex, and she's like, oh no, I haven't done it in a million years. Like, is it gonna hurt? Like, what are they? And then I'm just like, all right. But it's who the characters are that really informs a great sex scene. And if your characters aren't really present, then it's just porn, which is fun.
Hi, thank you both so much. I'm a huge fan of your books, Jasmine. And I guess going off of your point earlier, would you say that writing romance has kind of changed your own relationships in life, like friendship or otherwise?
Definitely. I think, one thing that I think about a lot in writing romance is like, what specifically are the things that would make these two people fall in love with each other? And then it does make me think about that in relationships and like, how do I help, like, what are the things that my friend or my mom or, someone I'm dating needs, and how can I provide that? Like, not how can anybody, but like, how can I? And so that is something that I have really thought about, especially over the course of the pandemic, because like, being able to, reach out to people and talk to people has sort of been the only lifeline so many of us had, especially in that first terrible year. It's all terrible, but and so it has made me really think about like the things that we're struggling with and how to help one another.
I'm so sorry to cut off for questions, but I want to make sure everyone has time to get their book signed. So just a few quick logistical notes for me before we close out. We are going to be selling additional books where you checked in, so you should feel free to head out there and get more books if you'd like. And we're going to be doing the signing right up here, but let's give Jasmine and Tia just like a minute or two to get settled. We do ask again that you keep your masks on during the signing line, and then you can exit out back where you came in. So let's give Jasmine and Tia another huge round of applause.